have with us Mark Tanner, who's dialing in from Shanghai. Mark, can you hear us?
Good afternoon. I can, Ranji. It's nice to see you.
I'm going to just ask you to say that again because you can hear us, but we could not hear you. So, there we go.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, loud and clear. So thank you for joining us from Shanghai. And we are here this afternoon to get the skinny on China, which is a play on the consultancy that Mark started and runs in China. You guys are a boutique insights consultancy, if I got that correct.
That's correct.
So it's November. We're still in November. I can't believe we're that close to Christmas, but still in November. And I think the best way to start is to talk about 11/11. So tell us what happened.
Singles Day, Double 11,
yes.
Whatever you want to call it. It was another successful year, about 15.5% growth across the two major platforms, Alibaba and JD, which is not like last year's 26, but still pretty respectable. And there were some big trends coming out of it. One was the rise of lower tier cities. They accounted for the vast majority of that growth. Another is eco-sustainability that really showed through, and from both a consumer perspective, but also playing heed to Beijing policy. And I think a big one, and probably relevant for a lot of brands, is increased fragmentation in the market. So you saw the likes of JD grew 28%, whereas Alibaba grew 8%.
Oh, okay.
So Alibaba's stronghold on Double 11 is certainly decreasing, and there's a whole lot of other platforms nipping at their heels.
So you talked about that eco-sustainability. Sorry, please carry on. I just wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, no problem. I think one of the big ones was just how competitive it's got. And if you look at it, it's always hyper competitive, but this year is particularly so. When you look at Alibaba, which grew 8%, but the number of brands selling or merchants selling on the platform grew 70,000 to 290,000. So 290,000, a growth of about 32%, all fighting for that growth in sales of 8%. So it's getting harder and harder and more expensive to acquire new customers.
Okay, so lower tier cities kind of getting in the game a little bit more. That's on the rise, and what you're talking about, that's a lot of brands competing for audiences.
Yes, it is, and you look at it, it's tough to make money on Singles Day. There was certainly less promotions this year, but when you look at the cost of acquisition, you need to be there on Singles Day, but you really want the investment to span well beyond that 2-week festival. You want it to go throughout the year. You want some payback.
So maybe now we jump into eco-sustainability, as you talked about. Can you tell us more about that? How are you seeing, Singles Day you associate with consumption, but to hear that there's a sustainable element to it, tell us more about that. How does that balance off?
Yeah, well, obviously we had Glasgow just during the time of Singles Day, and Xi Jinping was not there and copped a little bit of flack from some of the other world leaders. But it is by no means an indication of just how seriously they're taking sustainability and the environment and the carbon footprint of China, which is now bigger than every developed country in the world put together. So they're really driving that. There's a lot of policies around supporting that, and brands or events like Singles Day are certainly toned down as a result of that. You saw a lot of Alibaba put a lot of focus on sustainable green products. They had 100 million RMB worth of vouchers they were giving out, and a real support for anything, and all sorts of talk about recycling cardboard and things. But overall, it's a consumption festival. There's a massive footprint that comes from the result of it.
Okay, so still big consumption event, but slowly but surely the sustainability agenda is creeping in, which is a good start, I think.
Yeah, it's got to start somewhere. There's a lot like when you have 1.4 billion people, one small thing can make a big difference. But if they've really got to do more and more to really shift the dial and help kind of play their part in the world.
So you talked a bit about this year, even though the pies grow, more brands, more competition, but toned down. Singles Day was toned down. What do you mean by that? How do you see that scaling back?
Yeah, so part of it was the aligning with that sustainability policy coming from Beijing, but probably an even big, well, not probably, an even bigger part of that was this common prosperity that's a buzzword that's probably the most used buzzword in China right now. And that as a result, you saw particularly Alibaba, who has been under the spotlight from the regulators, they really tiered it back. They didn't have their usual annual gala, which has everyone from Taylor Swift to David Beckham to James Bond were there, and all sorts of festivities and light shows across Shanghai and whatever else. So this year was much more subdued, and you saw that everything from promotions through to the surrounding event.
So more subdued, more restrained, in line with that common prosperity. Will you tell us a little bit more about that, what you're seeing, what the hallmarks of common prosperity are?
Yeah, so everyone's got their opinion on and interpretation of common prosperity. But in a nutshell, if you look back over the last 20 years, the combined net wealth of Chinese consumers has grown from $7 trillion back in 2000 through to $120 trillion now.
Wow.
Absolute massive jump, unprecedented globally. But unfortunately, of that growth, 2/3 of it has come from the upper 10%. And they account for the vast majority of that wealth. And as a communist government, it doesn't really align this inequality and people being left behind. Doesn't really align with that. So in the last 6 months, you've really seen an acceleration of policies that really try and bring down wealth and money worship and flaunting wealth and things. And as a result, brands are much more aligned with that. The big tech platforms are leading the charge. Just in the last couple of weeks, you've seen Xiaohongshu Red, which is the big lifestyle platform and somewhere a lot of consumers go for trends. You've seen them really pushing back on displays of flaunting of wealth. You see brands, people that do it are getting flagged. There's the algorithm that's picking that up and it's really reducing the amount of that going on right now.
So I think for me with Xiaohongshu, and I get that I tend to associate that with a little bit of luxury purchase, or, do you think that crackdown on wealth, that excessive display of wealth, that's impacting luxury? Do you see it impacting other sectors maybe?
Totally. Luxury is definitely the brands have been the most active. You're seeing a change in hero products, much less bling. Everything from VIP loyalty programs are much more about showy flaunting. They're much more thoughtful and considered. Communications, even their choice of key opinion leaders, has been a lot better aligned now to this common prosperity. But even FMCG brands, and a good one that springs to mind is Mengniu, one of the two big dairy brands in China. Recently had a promotion, earlier this year had a promotion around, there's a TV idol show, and you could vote for your favorite idol by getting scanning the QR code and a cap of their products. And there were a bunch of idol worshippers that were unspying all this milk and unscrewing the lids, scanning it, and then showing off on social media, pouring this milk down the drain just to show their commitment to their idols. Oh. Obviously not great for one, food wastage, which is another one of Beijing's policies, but just that common prosperity where there's people that can't afford milk in parts of China. So it's you're seeing it spanning across every industry in China.
So you talked about this, in terms of, and it's a funny term to use in marketing, idol worship. And China's so known for KOL marketing and working with influencers. How do you see the impact of this approach towards common prosperity, a less flashy approach to marketing? Do you see that impacting KOL and KOL marketing in China?
Definitely, and it spans beyond just that flaunting of wealth. It's also these celebrities and key opinion leaders need to be more aligned with the ideals that China and Beijing sets. So there was a very famous case earlier this year with the Canadian Chinese celebrity called Chris Wu, who had some unscrupulous going on with a young lady or a few young ladies. And that kind of opened a string of Me Too type cases. And there was a lot of brands that invested a lot in some of these young pop idols that were not really aligning with what Beijing sees as ideal behavior. So a lot of them just disappeared off the internet in many cases. So something you're seeing is a lot more brands are doing a lot more due diligence into making sure these KOLs and celebs and these ambassadors aren't going to be doing silly things. There's no way to guarantee it 100%. But something that is a little bit wacky, it started in Japan some years ago, but you're really seeing a rise in virtual idols. And you're seeing brands like Porsche are subscribing to it. They're using virtual idols who are obviously squeaky clean. They don't get up to mischief in their spare time. And so you're getting much more of that now, that they're just not wanting to take the risk. It's novel. It's really appeals to Chinese consumers' love of anime and things like that. So that's really booming right now. And you saw a lot of that on Singles Day or Double 11, particularly with some of the luxury brands.
So the real life idols, the real life KOLs are being abandoned for virtual idols, and that's working.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's wholesale abandonment. Most of them are still using real tactile, but there's definitely been a rise in these virtual idols, and it's Chinese is going more virtual. Everything there's a lot of brands investing in the metaverse, and the country is very ripe for it.
So tell us about that. Tell us about the metaverse. Tell us about gaming as a phenomenon. We had this chat earlier this week, and it's that balance, isn't it, between what's done in real life, what's done online, and as much as I know the regulations kind of crack down on gaming, but that's still a huge thing still.
Yeah, gaming's a very interesting one because it really helps jolly up the population. They recently had the world champs for League of Legends, and the Chinese team won against the South Korean team in the finals, and it was huge. There's 500 million gamers in China. And it felt like all of them were out there celebrating. There were people singing their celebratory kooky things they were doing, like drinking from the toilet bowl to celebrate the wins, and stuff like this were going viral on social media. And China, which doesn't have a lot of world champion teams, particularly relative to its population, gaming is something they always do really well, and so it gives them something to celebrate, which obviously Beijing loves. They love a happy population. But at the same time, there's this strange pull that they don't want kids spending all their time in front of their screens playing computer games. And they made it a lot harder for minors. They can only play 1 hour a day, 3 nights a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's this strange, they're allowing everyone to be watching their favorite gamers on streaming, but at the same time, it's not until they're old enough that they're allowing them to cut loose and really play to any degree. But it is huge, and gaming is a really big part of a lot of marketing programs and strategies, and it really does resonate. Everything from gamification, but also a lot of these characters in the games are endorsing brands and themed brands, and also some of these champions are ambassadors for some of the brands as well.
So I guess that common prosperity translates into a common success. Everyone can get behind that. We all literally kind of celebrate and rejoice and are uplifted together. So we're talking about that increased regulation and considerations of all these different factors. I mean, are we at risk of marketing becoming more vanilla in China? How is a brand going to stand out? It's so competitive. What's a brand got to do, you think?
Yeah, it's a really good question because the lines in which a brand can play between are definitely narrowing, but at the same time, as it gets more competitive, and particularly as foreign brands are not as desirable as they once were, they have to
Okay.
do more and more to stand out because it is so competitive. And so as a brand, you do need to kind of know the limit, push it as far as you can without overstepping the line. And there's plenty of examples of that, but be slightly irreverent, but at the same time, obviously with Chinese characteristics, because the way we are irreverent in a lot of countries is quite different than it is in China. But just, you've got to have a personality, and branding has never been more important, particularly with the younger generations. They are much more, they're looking for a brand. They want to be sold the story. They want to connect with that brand much more than any other generation in China. So it's never been more important to stand out. But at the same time, you need to do that within the perimeters of what Beijing set.
So you want to stand out, but not too much, and you want to stand out, but with the right values. You touched on something just now. You said it's harder for Western brands to make an impact in the market. You know, why do you think so? Why
There's a
so?
whole lot of factors there. One, it was always going to happen. China is still, although it's 5,000 years old, it's still quite young in its current form. And kids are growing up now, brands are growing up now, and manufacturers are growing up, their quality control. So their products, their marketing is becoming much more slick. And also, there's so much money sloshing around that these brands have a lot of equity to throw at, or not equity, but cash to throw at marketing, which they've never had before.
That's
But
the
you
local
couple that
brands?
with, yeah, local brands. There's a lot of equity investors, the venture capitalists that are throwing money at these brands. So now they'll focus on things like acquisition rather than net profit and things. But also, Chinese are getting more and more proud as a nation of what they've done.
Definitely.
In the past, they wouldn't be seen dead with Chinese products, but now it's almost a little bit status symbol to have a Chinese product. So it really shows that you're supporting the country. And that's all accelerated in the last 2 years, or it's particularly since COVID, where China looks at all these other countries that have scrambled to contain this virus, where they believe they've done the best job in the world. And as a result, they think, well, if we can contain the virus, we can do everything better. So there's a lot of, they see that in their brands and a lot of things. And particularly, there's also some quite tangible concerns about imported products may have traces of COVID on it. So there's all these factors that are really pushing this drive for local products. But then in saying that, there's still a lot of incredible Western brands that, like if you look at the categories in Double 11,
Right.
Almost all of them were led by these great foreign brands that have really adapted to China and really done a good job of connecting with consumers and really well-aligned strategies.
No, so the fundamentals still count. You've got to still be really good at that, and actually maybe even smarter, a little bit cleverer to win, I think.
Yeah,
So,
it's about that data-led insights, and listening and adapting to them. A lot of these Chinese brands are incredibly nimble, and they've got all the data at their fingertips, and they're adapting as a result. And you're still getting a lot of Western brands that are taking or foreign brands, I should say, that are taking a lot longer. They've got decision makers who are abroad and many more gates to make decisions. And so that in many cases, they're missing a lot of these trends that are changing quite rapidly. So yeah, it's not just a great strategy, but it's also the ability to adapt, particularly at a tactical level.
no, that makes sense. I mean, everyone thinks it's commerce, right? That puts the C in China, but from everything you're saying, that it's competition I think that's something you've got to really think about and be great at to win. But must brands go harder, faster, bigger, spend more to win in China? Is that the way forward? Is that sustainable?
I think it's not just about spending more than everyone else. It's about spending smarter. It's about being more focused. And we see a lot of foreign brands coming in and they're quite generic. Whereas the most successful brands are very targeted. They're targeting geographics, they're targeting demographics, tribes, just really focus, whether it be targeting a number of them through different products, through different communications, different channels, but really making sure that you're much more meaningful than just trying to have this generic proposition that doesn't really appeal to anyone.
Oh, I like that. And I think that I know we're going to be chatting early next year about China brands and kind of delving into that a little bit more in detail. So this was a perfect starter, perfectly to whet the appetite. And Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ranji.